start. I just start.
Good morning. Please have a seat and let's listen to our prelude. Frank. Kia ora e te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Kia ora e ngā manuheri. No mai haere mai ki tēnei whare karakia o te atua. Welcome to the Unitarian Church, the space made sacred by Auckland Unitarians for 120 years. It's quite impressive. And my name's Sally Mabelle. I'll be the service leader this morning, stepping in for our minister, Clay Nelson, who's getting a well-deserved rest. He gets to relax and enjoy the service today. Happy winter solstice. This is the official shortest day of the year and the longest night. You can see the decorations. We were in here last night dancing, doing a ritual of getting into the darkest parts of ourselves and letting go. And then tonight we'll have a dance about bringing in the light. You're all welcome to join us. Today is the beginning of the waxing half of the year. From now until summer solstice, the days will lengthen and nights will shorten. Tomorrow marks the rebirth of light into our world. Today the promise is made that winter will come to an end. Now we can begin to plan ahead for the year, to think, to rest from activity, contemplate our lives, our joys, our concerns, and choose new seeds to plant in our lives for the coming spring. So what goals and actions did not serve you in the last year? That is what you sacrifice to winter. That is what you leave behind. That is what you give to death. Forgive and make peace with it now. And what seeds do you wish to plant in your life that you will give your energy and attention to in the new year? This is the dream and the hope of Yule, another name for winter solstice, Yule, to begin again in peace. We light this chalice in honor of life's sacred dance of living and dying. May its flame remind us of those who have passed to us fragments of holiness. May it remind us that we too are participants in the dance. Please join me in the covenant of the church in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls will grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. And please stand as you're able to sing Spirit of Life. Today? Oh, I don't see any little people. So we'll speak to the little people inside of each of us. It's a wonderful little story about the heart and the bottle. Okay. Let's check. This is a picture of all the things this little girl is doing with her father. Once there was a girl, much like any other. Whose head was filled with all the curiosities of the world. With thoughts of the stars, with wonder at the sea. She took delight in finding new things. Until the day she found an empty chair. Feeling unsure, the girl thought the best thing was to put her heart in a safe place, just for the time being. So she put it in a bottle and hung it around her neck. And that seemed to fix things at first. Although in truth, nothing was the same. She forgot about the stars. She stopped taking notice of the sea. She was no longer filled with all the curiosities of the world and didn't take much notice of anything other than how awkward or heavy and awkward that bottle had become. But at least her heart was safe. It might never have occurred to the girl what to do had she not met someone smaller and still curious about the world. There was a time when the girl would have known how to answer her, but not now, not without her heart. And it was right at that moment that she decided to get it back out of the bottle. But she didn't know how. She couldn't remember. And nothing seemed to work. The bottle couldn't be broken. It just bounced and rolled. Right down to the sea. But there, it occurred to someone smaller and still curious about the world that she might know a way, and it just so happened she did. The heart was put back where it came from. And the chair wasn't so empty anymore. But the bottle was. And now it's time for our joys and concerns. If you have a joy or concern, come up and say your name and let us know.
My name's John, and it is Father's Day in the U.S. today, where my two daughters live. So they have wished me a happy Father's Day, and that, I can tell you, is the profound joys of my life.
Two actually. But firstly, welcome back, Alex. It's lovely to see you. The first one is last Wednesday I was invited to a special talk at put on by the Neurological Foundation. They were celebrating 50 years of their brain bank, and because of different associations I have with it, I was invited along, and Patsy Reddy was there opening it, and Professor Curtis talked about the work that he's doing with Parkinson's and Huntington's disease. And I was so impressed, and I just sat there thinking, I am so blessed to have been born in this little country at the bottom of the world that punches so far above its weight in so many things, but we only ever really hear about sports people. And we are doing such wonderful things. I came out of there with so much hope. So here's to all the work the Brain Bank's doing. And the other one is a celebration of Kamala Harris walking in the first Vice President, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that's walked in a Pride parade in America, and acknowledging that the Pride parade was on the day that 49 people were shot in the Pulse nightclub.
Morena, my name is Ted, and I have two joys to express. One is that on Friday night, Kate and I went to the Covert Theater, which is about a stone's throw that way. And Elaine Tasker was one of the performers there, and you may have seen the promotions for that, for the improv theater that they do around. And we did that partly because of the promotion and partly because Kate had talked to Elaine. It was so much fun, and it's fun to support the arts, but it was just lots of fun to see the performers. We saw two shows there back to back, and it was great. Elaine was fantastic as well. My other joy is that staying on Corinne's American theme, the leader of one of the two countries of which I am a citizen went overseas on an overseas trip this past week and did not embarrass me.
Good morning, I'm Mark. Forgot to grab my name tag back there. And this morning I'll light a candle for Kate's sister, Philippa Todd, who died a week ago today in the Totra, South Auckland hospice near the Botanic Gardens. A lovely place. I was impressed with the staff there who are working around death, and yet they're so cheerful and pleasant and very delightful people. And I'll light a second candle for Philippa's family. Foremost, her mother, Jan Todd, Jeanette, who has, in recent years when Philippa's been too unwell to work, she's been living at home. And Jan has been her chief carer and friend. There was a lovely service Friday at the little country Anglican church on Alfriston Road, which was full to overflowing. And I enjoy, a few friends and family spoke about their memories of Philippa. I want to share one with you, what was my favorite. I met the Todd clan in this church about 22 or 23 years ago. And those of you who know him can probably relate to this story. Her brother Derek related the story when new in Philippa's teaching career. And she was a very generous teacher. She would routinely take a couple kids from pretty rough homes home with her for the weekend and pick them up and take them to school. And she went above and beyond as a teacher. And here she was a teacher in some small town, I think South Waikato or someplace, and there was a patched gang member who was kind of blocking her way at a venue, and she was trying to get out. He was trying to chat her up, and she gut punched him and sank to his knees and went and legged it for the car. She was very concerned, like, oh no, she feared retribution, that she'll have to leave this community now or something. But no, as a result, this man was just smitten. He was flirting and waving all the time after that. So rest in peace, Philippa. She long suffered, and her suffering is now over.
My name is Isabella. I have a concern to share today. Me and my flatmates have had some things go wrong with our house, so we're looking for a new place to live, which is quite stressful, but it's also a joy because lots of people have been helping us out with offering us boxes and helping us look for new places. So yeah, me and Anna are going to get downstairs to look at our children's planning now, but thanks, Sally.
And I'll light this candle for all the joys and concerns in our hearts that remain unspoken. And please stand as you're able to sing the winter verse of Chant for the Seasons. We're going to sing it through the same verse twice. The words are in your order of service. I think most of us know this, but actually, Frank, why don't you play it through once so we can hear it? Line twice too, that's not written. Autumn cold has turned the star wheel, winter is upon us. Autumn cold has turned the star wheel, winter is upon us. Gray the windy storms come upon our cheeks, the wet grain glistens, glistens. Autumn cold has turned the star wheel, winter is upon us. Leaping is the fire, golden in the glass, the cider glows like amber. Autumn cold has turned the star wheel, winter is upon us. Autumn cold And now, please join me for the shared reading by a Unitarian minister, Bruce Prewer. Spirit of winter. It says L leader, and that's C is congregation. Spirit of winter, we praise your blessings. Spirit of soaking rains, winds, and storms. Spirit of brisk winter mornings, of frosted paddocks under moonlight, of warm socks, coats, and gloves, heaters, and glowing fires. Spirit of winter, glorious winter, the unpopular, slandered season, yet one filled with renewed hope for farms, town, and city. Spirit of life, sustaining winter, water of irrigation, renewing the roots of life. Spirit of glorious winter, we praise your blessings. "30 years ago, it was this year, 1991, January, I had just moved I'd moved to Boulder, Colorado from Philadelphia area, and my fiance at the time had convinced me that Boulder was the healthiest city in America. The joke is that everyone's a massage therapist or a psychotherapist there, and everyone's got a PhD. We had just bought a house, and we were planning to be married that summer. And life was opening up, and in April of that year, I flew home to Philadelphia to finish off a required weekend seminar from a master's degree program in spiritual psychology. And my mom and dad picked me up at the airport on a Thursday night. As my 3 younger sisters had all moved out from home, I spent a quiet evening with just the 3 of us, Mom, Dad, and me. The very next morning, I was jarred awake from a deep sleep by my mother. "Sally, it's Dad, in the bathroom." She had received a call from his office. He wasn't at work. She heard the radio playing. She went to the bathroom, and there he was, lying dead on the floor. He had had a massive heart attack. He was 60 years old. Last year, I turned 60. And it was 8 years ago I faced my own mortality when I had to undergo some of you may remember, urgent, unexpected, open heart surgery. Within 2 weeks, the doctor said, I was a bit arrogant, thinking I was the healthiest person and I'm not gonna get sick like all those other people. And here I had a loose valve that had to be repaired just unexpectedly. That was a major. And so I remember laying in bed at night, and I said, "Honey, to my husband now, if I die tonight, I love you." And he'd say, "Well, if I die tonight, I love you." It's like that when you get to those stages. As the late poet Mary Oliver said, "Doesn't everything die at last and too soon?" What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Just like my father, none of us know what day will be our last. He looked fit and healthy. He was getting up, going to work. I'd like us to try on today the Buddhist practice of Maranasati. I didn't know there was a name for it. Maranasati is mindfulness of death and death awareness. It's a practice of remembering frequently, keeping in mind that death can strike at any time, and we should practice living with great care, with an urgency in every moment. In his article, Shining the Light of Death on Life, former Harvard Medical School psychology professor and founder of Cambridge Insight Meditation Center didn't write his name down, "Our culture does not encourage us to face death while we are still very much alive. This culture is inside of us, so without knowing you, I can assume, perhaps safely, that there may be some obstacles, some resistance to taking on a contemplation of this sort. I don't think it can be put any better than in the Hollywood wisdom of Woody Allen, who in one of his movies says, is not that I'm afraid of dying, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Even when we're terrified at some level of dying, we usually put this inevitability far ahead of us in some distant future. It's easier to do when we're younger. We still have lots of time. We don't really know very much about our relationship to a profoundly obvious and fundamental fact, that we could die at any moment. However, as we grow older, we begin to realize that we are all companions of age, sickness, and death. Seeing this more clearly can help us see how precious each one of us is and how precious each moment is. There's no way to be exempt from death. Those we love must also die, and really seeing this can enable us to see everyone more sympathetically. In the words of the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, life is impermanent, but that doesn't mean it's not worth living. It's precisely because of its impermanence that we value life so dearly. One thought I find comforting around the topic of death is found in the law of thermodynamics. This law supports the theory of eternal life, life everlasting, in Christian terms, resurrection, Hindu terms, reincarnation. The law of thermodynamics holds that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. It only ever changes form. It only ever transforms. The same is true for us, for our life energy. We all disintegrate at some point, and then we're transformed and reconfigured to continue to participate in the great dance of life, in the cycle of life. I'm again reminded of a line from Mary Oliver. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. As Sufi poet Jalaluddin Rumi says, life is a balance between holding on and letting go. The famous serenity prayer comes to mind. God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There's an ancient Celtic myth told traditionally around this winter solstice time of year about the Holly King and the Oak King. The Holly King, they're both twin brothers, and the Holly King appears as a woodsy version of Santa Claus. He dresses in red, wears a sprig of holly in his tangled hair, and is depicted as driving a team of 8 stags. Sound familiar? The Oak King is portrayed as a fertility god and appears as the Green Man, or the Lord of the Forest. Their story is one of sibling rivalry as a metaphor for the perpetual dance of struggle, victory, surrender, and defeat between the twins. The two kings engage in this endless battle or dance, reflecting the seasonal cycles of the year. At midsummer, the power changes hands, and the Oak King surrenders to his brother, the Holly King, once again. The story is a reminder to us that life goes on in an endless cycle of death, life, death, and rebirth. And you might remember the old Christmas carol. I never knew what that meant. The holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown, of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. The holly bears the crown. They changed that from the Holly King to Jesus Christ bearing the crown of thorns. So there's a lot of overlap between the pagan traditions and the Christian traditions. And the ivy, which I found out, looking up the origin of that song, the ivy symbolizes life everlasting because it continues to grow once its host dies. The ivy continues to grow. So I thought it was quite cool. Brings new meaning, and then they say the running of the deer. In that, so when you sing that Christmas carol, you'll have a new context. And I know we Unitarians are scientifically minded, so I'd like to share a scientific story of birth and death which demonstrates that faith, wonder, and the great mystery of life and death are not incompatible with science. You know, sometimes we think, oh, those religious people, or oh, those scientific people. We're actually quite similar, but we use different language. So there's a fun chant I found by a Unitarian evangelist. This is a lady named Connie Barlow. She lives in a van, and she travels around the country teaching science lectures to kids in schools in a fun musical way. So I'm going to chant this, and the words of it are in your order of service. So once you get the pattern, you could either read along with me or chant along with me if you dare. Okay, this is a story of life, death, and rebirth in scientific terms. Okay. In the beginning was the great radiance, 14 billion years ago. Out of that fireball came simple hydrogen and helium from that great glow. Gravity swirled those gases into stars, white, yellow, blue, and red. But no dancing planets till the birth of silicon, calcium, iron, and lead. The first generations of ancestor stars squeezed primal gases into stone, into oxygen and into nitrogen, into calcium for antler and bone. Then they expired and launched back into space, atoms born of pressure and strife. So later generations of stars like our own sun could have planets and maybe even life. We are made of stardust, we are born from death. Greet your cousins who twinkle in the night. What do we savor of our brief flickering lives? What do we to our descendants' delight? What do we leave to our descendants' delight? What do we savor in our brief flickering lives? What do we leave for our descendants' delight? What do we leave for our descendants' delight? What do we leave for our descendants' delight? And amen. The questions, I'll just give you a little tip. The questions today is, what do you need to give death to? What is dying in your life? Or what do you need to kill off? What needs to die in your life in order to make room for new life? So have a think about that when you have a chat with your neighbors. And and our closing hymn is a Yule hymn, and it's the personification, instead of the Holly King and the Ivy King, this one is about, or the Oak King, this one is about Lady Greensleeves, about the goddess of winter. And it's to the traditional tune of Greensleeves. Frank, play us a little intro. Stand as you're able, please. The winter moon is shining bright, the Yuletide candles are burning. Good people gather round tonight, the Sabbath wheel is turning. Welcome, sing to the sun, now as of old we greet thee. Welcome, sing everyone, glad praises to the Lady. So come together, old and young, good people all come singing to welcome in the returning sun, the light and hope she's bringing. Dancing, come join the ring as her Yuletide spell she weaves. Fair Queen, the evergreen, sweet, lovely Lady Greensleeves. Please join me in the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Time for notices. You have to turn it on. Grab my extinguisher.
Okay, so people, it's the third Sunday of the month, so I'm very pleased to give the Peace and Social Justice update. Sally Mabelle reports that the winter... Sally Mabelle reports that the winter solstice celebration with dances of universal peace is to be held here in the church tonight from 5 p.m. until 8 p.m., including a shared supper. Please RSVP to Sally after the service. All are, of course, very welcome. On the 11th of June last week, Dances of Universal Peace and Interfaith Outreach held dances at Earthsong Eco Neighborhood in Ranui with 17 participants. Upcoming events will be announced in the newsletter. Shireen Caldwell continues her work with Amnesty International and reports that a trade unionist was acquitted in France in May, marking a victory for the right to protest. Also, a Christian couple in Pakistan who spent 7 years in prison and were sentenced to death on blasphemy charges have been acquitted this month. Also this month, a letter was sent to the President of the Republic of Indonesia regarding a Papuan farmer imprisoned for a Facebook post. Regarding Glen Taylor School, last Sunday, of course, we enjoyed Chris Hurley's stimulating talk about their school camp that our congregation generously contributed to. Please note that the next Duffy Role Model Assembly will be on Friday, the 9th of July at 11 a.m., and all are welcome. Contact Brenda or Gary for details. Regarding Pacific Dyslexia Aid, fortunately, both Tonga and Samoa remain without community transmission of COVID, and they've both commenced vaccinations. However, they're justifiably being cautious about foreign visitors, which has slowed down our work there. However, I've begun sending emails to New Zealand companies asking for laptops that are up for replacement, and I do hope to visit Tonga again as soon as possible.
Great. Any other announcements? Other announcements? No. Okay, that's right. Turn that off. So for the closing words, I'd like you to stand and, as you're able, and join me. Closing words. This is a call and response from the Unitarian minister Jill McAllister. We've done it a couple times before. And just adapt the motions as you're able. Okay. So we reach down towards the earth, touch the ground if you're able, to remind ourselves we are supported by the earth. We reach out our arms to remind ourselves we are surrounded by friends. We put our hands on our heart and feel it beating to remind ourselves we are alive. And we feel our breath to remind ourselves we are connected with all that lives. We reach up above our heads towards the stars to remind ourselves we are connected with the entire cosmos, the entire universe. We are part of the interconnected web of all creations. And close your eyes for a second and breathe out. And as you exhale, imagining melting into cosmic essence. And as you inhale, inhale into emptiness. Exhale into cosmic essence. And expand your being into the whole universe. Inhale into emptiness. Exhale into cosmic essence. And please have a seat and we'll listen to the postlude.